Imagine an empire of millions, ruled by a divine sovereign, commanding tens of thousands of hardened warriors ready for battle. Now, picture this colossal civilization being utterly crushed by fewer than 200 foreign men. How is this historical impossibility even conceivable? This is the epic, tragic story of the moment two worlds collided, and how the Inca Empire, the largest in the pre-Columbian Americas, vanished into history. By the 14th century, the Inca Empire began an aggressive, meteoric expansion across the rugged Andes Mountains. They were relentless conquerors, quickly absorbing vast territories and diverse peoples. By the early 16th century, this civilization, which they proudly called the Land of the Four Corners, or Tawantinsuyu, controlled the vast western coast of South America, stretching thousands of miles. This was no loose confederation. It was an absolute monarchy, headed by the divine ruler, the Sapa Inca, whose word was unchallengeable and whose will was considered the law of the land. His immense territory was cleverly divided into 4 administrative sections, managed by a sophisticated bureaucracy of administrators and nobility. The empire was a mosaic of peoples with over 30 different languages spoken across its domain. Holding this diverse territory together was an extensive, powerful war machine built on conscription and discipline. Every able-bodied man aged 25 to 50 was liable for military service, with younger men under 25 serving as auxiliaries to carry supplies and equipment over the empire's impressive network of roads. While these conscripts spent much of their time farming, returning home to ensure the empire's vast food supply, the Inca ensured that basic combat training was provided to most males throughout the empire. This meant that the pool of potential warriors, while mostly agricultural workers, was enormous and ready to be mobilized. Inca armies were rigidly structured into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, led by their own native officers who were highly disciplined. Their gear and fighting styles were equally diverse, drawn from the specific regions the men were conscripted from, meaning subject groups brought their own unique tactics to the battlefield. Highland troops, for example, were masters of projectile weapons, expertly wielded the sling and bolas, cords tied with 2 or 3 stones, used with terrifying accuracy to trip and immobilize enemies, particularly over rough terrain. Coastal fighters favored throwing and thrusting spears, while the bow was the preferred ranged weapon in the eastern lands. Ranged attacks were typically used to soften the foe before the armies were ordered to close into brutal hand-to-hand combat. For close fighting, the Inca used formidable wooden clubs and heavy maces, topped with star-shaped heads made of stone, copper, or bronze. The prongs of these star maces concentrated the force of impact into a small area designed to inflict catastrophic damage with every blow against exposed heads or limbs. To protect their warriors, the Inca used protective helmets woven from wool and cane, sometimes reinforced with metal, paired with quilted woolen body armor and wooden shields. These defenses were richly decorated with vibrant colors, feathers, and cultural markings, making them an intimidating sight. This powerful, colorful parade of impending death once numbered around 200,000 soldiers strong. So, given this massive force, how could a mere fraction of that ever hope to stand against it? And why did this seemingly invincible empire suddenly become so vulnerable? The answer begins thousands of miles away and involves a tiny force of men led by Francisco Pizarro. In the 1520s, his expeditions to the western coast of South America were the first to bring news of the wealthy Inca Empire back to Europe. Pizarro was a man driven by gold and glory, and he was directly inspired by his distant cousin, Hernán Cortés, who had famously conquered the mighty Aztec Empire in Mexico. Pizarro knew that to succeed, he needed royal backing. He went directly to Charles V, the King of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor. Pizarro successfully convinced the king of the immense payday that conquering a new empire would bring, securing the royal task of bringing the land south of Panama under Spanish control. Naturally, the Spanish crown was to receive a non-negotiable 20% cut of all wealth acquired or stolen, depending on your point of view. With this new imperative, Pizarro set sail in December 1530 from Panama, reaching Colombia the following January. His initial force was terrifyingly small, just 180 conquistadors and 37 horses. Even with later reinforcements, his total army, meant to overwhelm the mighty Inca, was a mere 260 men. Yet, Pizarro was undaunted. He didn't get his name in the history books by being intimidated by the odds. This tiny force crawled south, moving at a snail's pace, but finally making first contact with the Inca in April 1532. Pizarro finally secured a meeting with the Incan Emperor Atahualpa that November. When the Inca first encountered these strange, small bands of newcomers, they were thoroughly unimpressed by their small numbers and ragged appearance. Nevertheless, the Inca leadership humored them, and both sides agreed to meet the next day in the nearby town of Cajamarca. What Atahualpa didn't realize was that he was already walking into a meticulously planned trap. Pizarro and his men occupied the town first, concealing their small force of 168 men, which included cavalry, a few arquebuses, early firearms, and light artillery, in a nearby courtyard and the surrounding buildings. Atahualpa arrived with a mere bodyguard of 3,000 to 4,000 largely unarmed attendants, while his massive 80,000-man army remained camped safely outside the town, posing no immediate threat. Pizarro, seeing odds of nearly 500 to 1 against his force, prepared for a devastating ambush. The Sapa Inca arrived in spectacular style, carried high on a massive golden litter by his warriors, and surrounded by attendants dripping in gold, silver, and precious stones. A sight that made the Spaniards practically salivate over the wealth they were about to seize. Pizarro then sent an emissary demanding that Atahualpa submit to the Catholic Church and the authority of King Charles V. The emissary also handed the emperor a Bible. Atahualpa, not understanding the religious or cultural significance of the object, scornfully threw it away, an act Pizarro instantly seized as justification to attack. With the battle cry of "Santiago!" the Spanish leapt from hiding. They opened fire with their arquebuses, the sudden deafening thunder and puff of smoke instantly shocking the unsuspecting crowd. The cavalry and infantry charged into the helpless throng. The Inca had never seen a firearm before, and even more terrifying were the half-ton beasts the invaders rode. Horses that moved faster than any person could run. Panic erupted. Many of the Inca attendants fled, trampling one another as the Spanish cavalry rode them down. The infantry made so good an assault that in a short time most of them were put to the sword. As one witness wrote, Pizarro himself drove straight for Atahualpa's litter. Unable to pull the ruler off, Pizarro and his conquistadors instead began furiously slaughtering the litter bearers. As each bearer fell, another warrior immediately took his place, as allowing the divine Sapa Inca to touch the ground was strictly forbidden. Eventually, a final squadron of cavalry charged the litter, toppling it and allowing Atahualpa to be captured. With their sacred leader fallen, all organized resistance vanished in a matter of hours. The final toll of this horrific one-sided engagement was staggering. Around 7,000 Inca were killed, with only one Spanish casualty. The difference in casualties illustrates the sheer psychological and technological disparity. With Atahualpa held hostage, Pizarro demanded a room filled with gold and silver as ransom for his release. The Inca delivered the ransom, but the emperor was then accused of plotting against the Spanish, a political pretext, and executed by strangulation. With their supreme divine ruler dead, the Spanish were able to march on Cusco, the Incan capital, virtually unopposed. This quickly established Spanish control over the Inca Empire, though rebellions and guerrilla warfare would continue to plague the region for decades afterward. So, how did fewer than 200 conquistadors obliterate an army orders of magnitude larger and topple the largest empire in the New World? The simple truth is, it took more than just a handful of men. The answer is a perfect storm of interlocking factors. The Inca at Cajamarca were practically unarmed and, trusting the goodwill of their emperor, did not anticipate an ambush within their own territory. The loud bang of the few slow-firing arquebuses and the terrifying sight of the charging cavalry generated a primal, paralyzing fear. For a civilization whose largest beast of burden was the llama, the sheer power and speed of the horse cannot be overstated. The noise, the smoke, and the speed shattered their morale instantly. The Incas' devastating stone and bronze weapons were nearly useless against the solid steel breastplates and helmets worn by the conquistadors, whose sharp steel swords easily cut through the Incan woolen body armor. This massive gap in military technology made the Spanish virtually invulnerable to the primary Inca weapons: biological warfare, unintentional. This is perhaps the most critical factor. Years before Pizarro's arrival, an epidemic of diseases like smallpox, carried by Europeans, had already ravaged the population, killing an estimated 2/3 to 90% of the empire. The previous Sapa Inca in 1528 was killed by this epidemic, which sparked a brutal civil war between his sons for succession. When the Spanish arrived, Atahualpa was technically in control, but had not yet fully consolidated his power. The empire was already weakened and divided. The Inca belief system held the Sapa Inca as sacrosanct and divine. When he was threatened or captured, no Inca warrior dared do anything that might jeopardize his life, even when a tactical attack would have been prudent. The capture of the divine ruler was effectively the instantaneous seizure of the entire state's chain of command and ideological heart. This unique and tragic combination of factors — disease, civil war, ideological paralysis, and technological shock — caused the mighty Inca Empire to fall to an army small enough to fit into a college lecture hall, forever changing the course of history in the Americas. What other colossal empires in history were brought down by such unforeseen circumstances, and how did their cultures endure? The story of the Inca Empire's collapse is a stunning, tragic testament to the complex forces of disease, technology, and belief that define history. If you found this historical deep dive compelling, make sure to like this video and share your insights in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more captivating animated history documentaries. Our purpose is to bring history and current events to life in an engaging and accessible way. Remember, all the historical context, events, and facts presented are based on respected historians, with the relevant references available on screen. Stay tuned for our next episode.